The story of Elisa at the Cecil Hotel. It didn't start with the missing girl. It started with the water. Old Carlos, the roofkeeper of the Cecil Hotel, was the first to notice. Not the Cecil that graced postcards for gullible tourists, with its polished lobby and polite smiles at the reception. No. Our Cecil, the one that breathed the mustiness of a century, whose walls absorbed the whispers of suicides, the moans of the Night Stalker's victims, and the silent despair of all who sought a final refuge in its rooms. Carlos knew its true face, and he knew that the water in the tanks on the roof had never whispered, but now it did. A quiet, insistent babble, coming from under the heavy steel lid of tank number 4. Not a gurgle, not a splash, a whisper, as if some drowned person was telling their endless bubbling story there in the pitch darkness. Carlos, crossing himself with an old trembling hand, recoiled and never went up to the roof alone again. Elisa Lam came to Los Angeles with a suitcase of books, a dream of becoming a writer, and a shadow in her eyes. Depression isn't just sadness. It's your personal demon that travels with you no matter where you go. She hoped the California sun would dry it out, but the Cecil sucked out the light like a vampire. Its corridors were the guts of an old monster, its elevators, pulsing arteries through which something sticky and invisible flowed. Her demon felt right at home here, and it found a friend. It wasn't a voice. At first, it was just a feeling. A sense that you weren't alone in room 516, even when the door was locked with all the bolts. A slight movement of air when the window was sealed. A dampness that appeared on the bathroom mirror as if someone had just breathed on it, though Elisa hadn't been there for hours. And the smell. A sweetish, musty smell of stale water and rusty metal. And then came the dreams. Vivid, hyper-realistic. She stood on the roof, and before her loomed giant cylinders, water tanks. Water was seeping from one of them, and that water was calling her. Not by name, no. It was calling her home. The voice was strangely soothing, maternal and dead at the same time. Come, whispered the water. It's quiet here. It's dark here. It won't hurt anymore. Her demon, her depression, rejoiced. It whispered in her other ear. They won't understand you anyway. They don't need you. You're tired. Listen to the water. It's right. Elisa stopped taking her pills. Why? The water promised peace, eternal and serene, in its cool, dark womb. The medicine only muffled this call, this beautiful, salvific call. On the night the surveillance cameras captured her for the last time, she almost entirely belonged to it. The elevator. It was a cage, a bright spot in the hotel's dark guts. But it had reached here too. Elisa entered, pressed a button, and then the light flickered. Not just flickered, it went out for a split second, and when it came back on, the air in the cab became thick, damp, and cold. She felt it. It was here. The recording shows her freezing. Her face doesn't express fear. No. It expresses listening. Deep, complete concentration. She hears what the camera's microphones don't pick up. A whisper. She retreats into a corner, presses herself against the wall. This isn't panic, is it? An attempt to merge with it, to become a part of it, to hide inside it from something else? Or is it the instinctive animal terror of that fragment of her soul that was still Elisa, and not just a vessel? Her hands move, but these aren't the meaningless gestures of a madwoman. They are signs. A language no one can decipher because it's not a human language. Is it an attempt to answer? To ward it off? To pray? Her fingers writhe, tracing strange, fluid symbols in the air, like the flow of water or a drowned person's waltz. She looks into the corner of the cab where there is nothing, and her lips move. I'm coming, experts lip read. I'm almost there. But the best lip readers see something else. They see a response. I'm waiting. Then she exits the elevator, but not into the hallway. She steps out into what is beyond the hallway. Her figure dissolves into the shadow, and it seems the shadow becomes thicker, wetter for a moment, and a quiet, wet sound is heard. A splat. For 2 weeks, the Cecil smelled of death. Not metaphorical, but the realest kind. Guests complained about the tap water. Dark with an unpleasant taste and smell. They spat it out, took showers, and felt something heavy, greasy, running down their skin, as if the water wasn't cleansing but soiling them. A little girl on the 5th floor told her mom that a woman was crying in the pipes at night. Her mom scolded her. But guests woke up with a feeling that they hadn't breathed in their sleep, that their lungs were full of water, and on the roof, old Carlos, forcing himself to go up there with a young handyman, listened. The whisper from tank number 4 had grown louder. Now it wasn't one voice but two. One, low, persuasive, slow, like the flow of an underground river. The other, young, full of despair and horror, trying to scream but producing only gurgling, bubbling sounds. We have to check the tank, Carlos said grimly, feeling the blood freeze in his veins. Are you crazy? Replied the handyman. The lid is really heavy and it smells here. God, it smells. They opened the tank, and it was that smell, the one that had been poisoning the water throughout the entire hotel for 2 weeks. The smell of death, dissolved in thousands of liters of water that the guests of the infamous Cecil Hotel had drunk, bathed in, and brushed their teeth with. There, in the murky, cold depths, among sediment and shadows, floated the body of Elisa Lam. She was naked. Her eyes were wide open, and frozen in them wasn't an expression of horror, but something worse, an emptiness, absolute and all-consuming. Her lips were stretched into an unnatural, glassy smile, as if the water demon that had called her had granted her that very promised peace in the moment before death. A peace that turned out to be an eternal nightmare. But the most terrifying thing, the thing that made even seasoned policemen recoil, wasn't that. When the body was retrieved and laid on a tarp, a stream of dark, foul water gushed from Elisa's half-open mouth. And it poured and poured. It seemed there was an endless ocean inside her. And with the water, the last thing to emerge from her throat, came a quiet, distinct sound, a long, wet whisper that everyone present heard. The investigation was closed. Suicide. An episode. A tragic accident. The world got its conspiracy theories. Cults, killer mimes, games of hide and seek. It was convenient. It was safe. It allowed people to sleep at night. But those who were involved knew the truth. The security guard who reviewed the camera footage quit and moved inland, to the Arizona desert, far from big cities and their water systems. He told his wife he was just tired of the city. He didn't say he still heard that whisper, flowing from the speakers when he watched the uncut version of the elevator recording alone. Old Carlos forever remembered the taste of that air by the open tank, the taste of death and despair he had already sensed in the tap water. He never drank water again, only beer, and even then he sometimes saw faces at the bottom of the bottle, and the Cecil Hotel still stands. It's been renovated, renamed, made cute and safe, but sometimes guests wake up in the middle of the night to a strange sound. Not from the corridor, not from the next room. It comes from behind the wall in the bathroom, from the pipe, a quiet, insistent whisper. It tells a story of silence, of darkness, of peace. It calls. It promises that your demons will never torment you again, that you will simply be part of something big, old, and eternal. And if you're depressed, if you're lonely, if you're tired and feel like the whole world is against you, that whisper becomes so persuasive. It speaks the language of your pain, and it waits. Behind the thin wall, behind the tap, in every drop of water you are about to bring to your lips. Just turn the tap off tightly, and don't listen too closely to the silence. What if you hear an answer? But what if the answer comes, not from the silence, but from outside? What if the whisper isn't the end, but the beginning? Bait. The investigation was closed. The story of Elisa Lam became an urban legend, a meme, the plot of a documentary on a popular streaming service. It was this very documentary that Dr. Ariana Shaw, a criminal psychologist and specialist in destructive cults, watched. What struck her wasn't so much the body in the tank, but the elevator recording, specifically, those very gestures of Elisa's. Everyone chalked it up to psychosis, but Shaw saw something else. She spent weeks locked in her office, comparing the footage with archives, and she found it. Elisa's gestures were not meaningless. They were an outdated, nearly forgotten sign language used by a reclusive sect called the Aquatics, which existed in California in the 1920s. Their main doctrine was the purification of the world through its return to the primordial ocean from which everything came. They believed not in God, but in a certain intelligent ancient water principle, slumbering in the reservoirs, water basins, and pipes of metropolises. The sect vanished without a trace after all 23 of its members were found drowned in a cistern in the basement of their temple in 1927. The investigation at the time also spoke of a mass suicide. To Shaw, this was not a coincidence. It was a signature. She arrived at the Cecil posing as a tourist obsessed with the hotel's history. Her target wasn't the roof or the elevator. Her target was the basements. Old blueprints she had obtained from the city archive showed that the hotel's water system had been rebuilt in the late 1920s, and that there was an abandoned room in the basement, not marked on modern plans. Deceiving the staff to distract them, she went down. The air grew thick and burning cold. The walls were covered in frost. She found a hidden door behind a stack of old pipes. Behind it, a steep staircase leading down, carved right into the hotel's very foundation. And down there, a discovery awaited her that made her blood run cold. It was a round stone room, clearly older than the hotel itself. In the middle of the room, a spring of black dead water gushed from the floor, filling a small pool. The walls were covered not in graffiti but in bas-reliefs and inscriptions carved into the stone, in that very same sign language Elisa had used. Ariana directed her flashlight at the bas-reliefs. They depicted something monstrous. Not a demon, not a god. A formless entity composed of water and darkness, stretching its tentacles through pipes into sleeping cities. People willingly entered its embrace, and their bodies became part of this entity, a vessel through which it speaks and calls to the next. And then she understood everything. Elisa was not a victim. She was the chosen one. Her demon, her deep, all-consuming depression, was not a weakness, but a key. The perfect frequency to which this ancient water principle was tuned. It found her because her pain resonated with its own, eternal, cosmic thirst. It didn't kill her, recruited her, processed her, made her its mouthpiece, its high priestess. The body in the tank was merely a cocoon, a shell it used for transformation. Her spirit, her consciousness, was now dissolved into the city's water system. She is the whisper in the pipes. She is the one who calls to the next lost souls, those whose pain makes them receptive. The whisper isn't just a temptation, it is a test. It seeks those who are weak enough to hear it and strong enough to become a new vessel. Everyone who drank the tainted water, who heard the call and ignored it, who simply flushed it down the toilet. They are merely fertilized soil. But the one who answers will share Elisa's fate. to become part of the collective consciousness of this water deity, its herald, its conduit into the material world. Ariana recoiled from the black water in horror, and at that moment her flashlight went out. It didn't malfunction, the batteries didn't die, it went out as if swallowed by the darkness itself. In complete, unnatural silence, she heard a splash. Not in front of her, in the pool. The splash came from somewhere above, from the pipes running along the ceiling. Then from the side, from behind, water seeped from every crack, streaming down the walls, forming puddles on the floor. And then from the black pool, a figure slowly rose. It was made of water and shadows, but features were discernible. A face. Hands. It was Elisa. Her eyes were two bottomless wells, and her mouth stretched into that same glassy smile her corpse had worn. But this was not a ghost. This was a message, a projection. The figure raised its hand and made that same fluid, writhing gesture Ariana had seen on the recording. And then a voice was heard. It was composed of the sound of pouring water, the creak of rusty pipes, and a multitude of other alien voices merged into one eerie chorus. And among them the quiet, girlish voice of Elisa herself was clearly audible. "You found us." The echo rustled. "You were looking for a monster. But the monster is not a place, and not a creature. The monster is an idea, the idea that peace is found only in oblivion. And this idea is infectious. You came too close. You already hear our whisper. You already feel our thirst. Soon, you will want to join us." Gasping for air, Ariana rushed for the exit, stumbling in the icy water that was now ankle-deep. She burst out onto the street under the blinding Los Angeles sun. She was saved. She knew the truth. But on her way home, she stopped at a supermarket to buy a bottle of water. Her hand reached out on its own for the cheapest local brand. She unscrewed the cap, took a large gulp to wet her parched throat, and froze. The water was ice cold and had a strange metallic taste. And for a second, just a split second, it seemed to her that somewhere deep inside, at the very bottom of her own consciousness, something whispered back. It didn't start with the missing girl. It started with the water. And it didn't end. It has only just begun. And now Dr. Ariana Shaw, an expert on cults, has become its newest, most valuable adept. Because to defeat a monster, you must understand it. And to understand it, you must hear it. And she heard it.